Awesome. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are just at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Heather Grant. I am one of the community admins here at the Maintenance Community by Upkeep. Thank you for making the time to join us for today's webinar. If you are not already a member of the Maintenance Community Slack group, we would love to have you join us. I will add the link to sign up in the chat in just a moment. Today we have Kathy Ma joining for a presentation on the basics of smart procurement. Kathy is the VP of Platform Growth and Engagement at Thomas, and I know we have a great presentation lined up for us today. The recording from our session will be available in the maintenance community on Slack tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides that you see here today. I will also drop a link to these slides in the chat in just a moment so you can follow along live today. Kathy herself also is available to answer any questions in the Slack group, so please feel free to share the recording of our webinar or the invitation to Slack directly with friends, colleagues, or anyone else you know who would benefit from hearing some of Kathy's expertise. My last piece of housekeeping, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation for today. You'll notice that your cameras and microphones are not turned on, so what you'll want to do if you have any questions for Kathy as we go through the presentation is you'll use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen, where I'll drop those links in just a moment. Feel free to chat your questions as they come up, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of our time today. Any questions that we maybe don't get to during our live time today, we will answer offline in the community. That's all from me. Thank you once again, everyone, and Kathy especially for being here with us today. Kathy, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Heather. So first of all, let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen properly? I think so. I can see it myself. Really lovely to get to know all of you. I think there are around 16 of you online right now. I was excited. I was just telling Heather that it's great to see a bunch of consultants and engineers on this call. So welcome. Today, we're going to talk about thomasnet.com, but in the context of smart procurement. So let's jump right in. Now, I like to do some housekeeping myself before any webinar I host. So in case in the CAT skills we have any maintenance or reliability problem, LOL, please be patient with the Wi-Fi. And as Heather said, feel free to submit your question on the chat box because I'm keeping an eye on the other monitor. I wasn't actually playing, bejewels on the screen next to me. And we'll circulate a link to the copy. I think Heather just did that. So if you want to follow along, that's great. Now, let me jump in. I'm Kathy, and you may notice that my accent is a little bit weird. So I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I spent my whole professional career in London for about 10, 15 years. And then I met my husband at a wedding, and he's a Brooklyn, New Yorker. And there I am. He actually did some math in terms of the average percentage of sunshine you get in New York State and London to convince me to move here. And the number was crazy. I think it's like 70% versus 49 or something. So I couldn't really debate with statistics, which is the focus of our presentation today. I started my career as a Wikipedia sociologist. I have a Master of Philosophy, which is like a mini PhD, and a taught master in humanities and social science. And I'm going to share with you some of my key learnings and how to derive hypotheses and use data and visualization to tell stories and to inspire action. And I work across different organizations. At Thomas, my main role is really to help us grow our audiences, reach out to awesome MRO experts like you guys, but also to democratize a lot of our data and knowledge in the industry because we've been around for over 123 years. Speaking of which, who are we? What do we actually do? So there are 4 big aspects of Thomas. For those of you who might be around in the sector for a bit longer, you might have seen the giant Thomas Register, which is a great green book. What we do is we have 500,000 suppliers listed in our database. We connect industrial buyers to US and Canadian-based suppliers from alloy to zinc. And we also do industrial marketing for over 1,000 manufacturers. They use us as an agency to help them do content marketing, SEO, website building, plus the product data solution, which is a bit like Shopify on steroid for massive organizations such as SwitchLog and Timkins. So when you go find specialized bearings for your wind turbine, you might be using Thomas white label technologies. Because of all these incredible data and technologies, we turn it into the anonymized Thomas industrial data, which I will give you some insights about in a bit on how we use it to help the country overcome COVID-19. Now, last slide about Thomas, we do have 1.3 million registered active users. With that, a bunch of our users are actually MR and procurement professionals. So what I'm about to show you when it comes to an intro to smart procurement is through working and talking to a lot of chief procurement officers, innovative scientists, and learning from them on what are the best practices today. Now, as a former academic, when I talk about a new topic, I always like to start with basic definitions. If you actually rely on to the older Canadian US style definition of smart procurement, you will see that it meant socially responsible procurement, as in how can you source really intelligently, but sustainably to your community and your environment. But in the modern days, we have a more kind of up-to-date definition of smart procurement, which is the use of data, machine learning, and AI-powered smart procurement. So for today, I'm going to lean towards the AI-powered definition a bit more to start. But for the second part of my presentation, I'm going to actually give you access to an incredible corpus of classification data that Thomas gives away for free, where there are a lot of diversity and certification-based data that aligns with suppliers and spend categories that you're more than welcome to use for free. And that will also help you with a social responsible definition of smart procurement. So we're hitting two birds with one stone. I always say two stones with one bird, which, you know, who wants that? No one wants that. So we cover the definition of smart procurement. And I personally, I owe data a lot. Like my whole career, what jobs are you going to do when you started your career as a sociologist or Wikipedia, studying the power of trust? It sounds really cool, but it doesn't really give you any hard skill. But I was wrong, because turns out every business needs data to do 4 things for them. By the way, you have access to the slide. Don't worry about taking notes, and everything's recorded. So the 4 really key points of data that I think really supercharged my career, number 1, is 99% of the companies I talk to are not satisfied with how they are capturing and visualizing performance. And performance can be in procurement, can be in MRO, it can be just, you know, driving traffic to convert people to buy products on your website for your company. Data capture and visualization are key, and I'm going to give you a bunch of examples throughout this presentation. The second really important aspect is detecting anonymous events. I love using health data as an example. If you wear your Apple Watch and you track your heart rate all the time, if suddenly something weird happens, you get an alert. It's the same with business. Sometimes if we suddenly see traffic or revenue engagement drop of a certain type of categories on our platform, either the number is wrong or something bad happens. And with COVID-19, with supply chain disruption, I'm sure actually seeing anomalous events are actually more common than not. And we'll give you an example on that later on as well. But sometimes actually, I was just saying to my team today that I love seeing problems, because when you see what are truly something that's off, that's the moment when you can start fixing it. And we have so many engineers in this group, so you can diagnose and de-escalate issues at hand. And finally, how do you use data to predict future events? I have some examples as well. So let's actually start with machine learning, or the role of machine learning in smart procurements. And there are 3 top use cases I like to feature today. Number 1 is when you are in maintenance or repair and you're responsible in looking into how your company is spending the money, or if you're optimizing your budget, having the right spend classification workflow is really important. You can do it by bare hands, but with natural language processing and machine learning, you actually can save a lot of time with the right software or the right skill sets in your organization. We talk about an anomaly detection, and I'll give you an actual example in a bit in just looking at, the standard deviation of how things are supposed to perform. For example, if you're used to buying lumber at a certain price, and as you know, with COVID-19, everything just kind of went insane. And you start seeing a crazy kind of delta of pricing happening to lumber really early on, I'd say around last Q4. That can help you actually start preparing your procurement strategy, or at least understand a bit better of your inventory situation at that given moment. And finally, vendor matching. That's the part when I'm going to bring in thomasnet.com and give you access to a lot of free data in terms of how we classify vendors already done for you. So let's actually talk a little bit about spend classification. Now, I have a special slide where I majorly declare that I'm not a data scientist, but I've worked across many BI functions, and I manage a lot of business analysts and data scientists. What I learned is that in this day and age, there are a lot of scripts out there where when you have a research hypothesis, when you have a certain ways of wanting to understand how your data interplay with one another, you don't have to start scripting and building your formula or your methodology from scratch. So this is called a black box machine learning. And one thing that I've done throughout this deck is I actually procured and looked through a lot of free courses. And if you are not just a mechanical or electric engineer, you're into data science as well, I highly encourage you to look at Bloomberg. They have an MDU Foundation of Data Science graduate training course on GitHub, and it's completely for free, where there are over 21 mini lectures really documenting what machine learning is. But within a super high level of you guys, maybe you're a manager, maybe you just need to really figure out the start of smart procurement. What the key mental model I want to offer you today is machine learning is great when you have a problem that you define even before you bring in any technologist or data scientist. Say a really good example is you might want to actually look at all the spend you've done in 2020, and you want to compare that to 2019. And by the time you actually classified all of your spend, you may start having some hypotheses. What are the categories that are actually performing really abnormally? Or what are the categories where we aggressively added additional vendors when we shouldn't be? But a big part of it could be because of COVID-19 disruption. So when you actually apply the right data set and you come up with the right framework, you don't have to build everything from scratch. You can train your algorithm to start formulating against your hypothesis, and you can launch the data and regroup again. A really good example for us is at Thomas, and I will get to it in a bit. We have 500,000 suppliers, and you may actually come to a platform as someone who is building a wind turbine. And you may look at a bunch of suppliers that actually are known to be bearings manufacturers. But by aggregating a bunch of data in terms of engineers just like you, who might be looking for a set of bearings that we thought, normally for the last 5 years, that's what everyone's looking into, we actually can use machine learning to help detect new types of bearings that engineers like you are looking today, thus actually giving you a new set of suggested bearings that you should look at as well. So really exciting, kind of easy Python script that you can look at today to bring in some data science intern to start playing around. It doesn't have to be expensive. The other really good example I love is abnormality detection, when data patterns start telling stories. And I have a fun example, and then I have a real life example for you. So this is actually something that I took from the Bloomberg lecture. And I love this example because there's a startup called CitySense. What they did is they actually tried to use real-time taxi feed data at Five Penn Plaza in New York City to see if they can predict where the big party was. Now, this was done using 2013 data, and now I bet it's a lot harder because you have Lyft, you have Uber, and people are not partying anymore. But bear with me with this metaphor. So I'm showing you this example because actually I thought I was a visual person, and it means that I would never be able to manipulate data and build stories and actually become a data savvy person, but that's not true. Because once you actually map data out, even all you do is just plotting the data into an Excel graph on, what happened for the last 7 days across 4 times the last 7 days, you start seeing patterns. So immediately, you all engineers, business people, you can tell that the dots are from Sunday to Saturday for 27 weeks, a distribution of taxi pickup. And you may be like, okay, this I can see something. I can see something interesting. And the power of smart data is you then overlay statistical regression line. Well, regression lines just mean when you kind of move data through the same pattern again and again and plot the main repeated pattern, then you start actually getting a beautiful way of seeing the outliers. And then you can see on Sunday and Mondays, there are dots that are really way above. And then if you actually overlay the same set of data with one part of standard deviation, which I'm sure at some point I can give you guys a separate mini lecture about Statistic 101, but really it's just telling you outside of the most commonly occurring incident, what are the likely, distribution, the probabilistic, segment that is similar to the median and the mean line. So now you're like, okay, now I can see anything above the really kind of red dots. I can start seeing pattern abnormality. And you actually literally can do the same thing with the light bulbs you've been buying for the last 27 weeks across vendors. And you don't always necessarily have to be a data scientist using machine learning black box algorithm to do this. Really, with some elbow grease and data visualization, and I'm going to give you some tools in a bit, that's something you can do today. And once you find an outlier, it could be a vendor that's like charging something very, mundane at a significantly higher margin. Immediately, you have a tracker. Now, I promise you I had a fun example. So the first example was a bit innocuous. I can look at taxi detection pattern and find out where the parties are. That feels so good, isn't it? That's like so pre-COVID. But we actually been through hell and came back together as a community, isn't it? So for Thomas, as I mentioned, we've been around for over 120 years. We've been commanded by multiple presidents for our contribution in US economy. So when COVID-19 happened, we were very concerned. In particular, we started detecting a lot of really weird surges on thomasnet.com, and I'll explain what we do on our platform in a bit, but I want to tell you the story first. There is a tremendous amount of crazy demand for PPE and COVID-19 related second-tier sourcing, such as fabric and cloth, tube steel. We also see really a lot of disinfectant sourcing and UV filter, as well as later on dry ice, because when the vaccine distribution cadence started to pick up, people are really running out of dry ice. So I actually started seeing the data as early as January, right? So because of having that kind of instinct and insight combined together with our years being peeled onto the ground, as early as mid-March, we launched the COVID-19 response system at Thomas. So what it really does is very simple. We send a digital flare to our 1.3 million registered users, and we say, okay, together for industry, if you can supply critical PPE, do let us know. And to our surprise, and I'm having goosebumps telling you the story, that over close to 4,000 manufacturers volunteered. A lot of them actually already bought PPE with their vendors when nothing was available, trying to not sell them at a profit, trying to sell them at cost or even donate them to hospitals, public organizations, but they couldn't get through to anyone because it was that crazy. But through the power of Thomas, once we added these manufacturers onto our platform, we didn't stop there. We have over 100 experts in our organization. We're a small company, family-owned, with around 300 staff. Our engineers and content expert work around us at the clock, including weekends, in codifying the spend category and capabilities of each of our suppliers. We always do for anyone, but in particular for the PPE and ventilator manufacturers, to increase availability and capability. And as such, by the end of the crazy surges, and you can see from February 2020 to April 2021, we we really kind of pushed through a lot of supply chain requests from mask, gloves, sanitizer, fabric, alcohol, rubber, plastic, laboratory equipment to thermometers. Over 2 million users actually use our system, generating 5 million page views, over 500,000 supplier evaluations. I could see our data. You know, you have FEMA, Raytheon, NASA, countless orphanages, hospitals using the system. So this is to really give you a true example that you don't need to be a data scientist. I am not a data scientist, and I don't code. I cannot code Python. I cannot do SQL. I'm ashamed to say that. You guys may be giggling behind the screen. But I am a fan of something that I coined, maybe someone else said so too. I call it data sculpting. I bet for your job, for what you do, you have access to infinite rows and columns of data. And I encourage you to use these tools I'm about to show you that are completely for free. And you might already been doing that, Microsoft Excel. You can actually do really fun correlational and regression analysis using Microsoft. I don't even do macro. So, but sometimes, as I demonstrated using the Taxiscape example, you can see once you start plotting data week over week with a simple hypothesis, are my light bulbs getting more expensive? Are there any vendors that are giving me a median or a mean of pricing that's really unique and bad compared to everyone else? You can start using Excel and do a lot of damage. The other aspect of it is I love Google Data Studio, and the biggest difference I see between Excel and Data Studio is that I know you can do that with Excel, but I'm feeling like a boomer now. I'm like a Saniel, whatever. I feel like with Google Data Studio or Tableau or Looker, the other two is a paid platform. You may have access to it, but Google is completely free. It's easier for me to pull data through APIs and plugins where I can have dynamic weekly updates of the same report, but in a real-time basis. With that, I can actually see, you know, trends with a quick refresh. So Google Data Studio is a huge fan. And I have to say, for the few slides that you saw with the crazy surges of PPE and all the kind of color-coded thermometers and all of that is all done by Google Data Studio. So, and another really great tool that I love is Flourish.studio. So you will see a lot of new style of data visualization by map, by race bar. You see things moving really fast. A lot of those graphs is actually generated by Flourish. It's free as a data visualization tool. You literally can paste a bunch of Excel data into their table, and then you can choose using their AI, a graph that can really tell a story for you, and then you can tweak and change things from there. Now, finally, I think I was an artist. I think, you know, people think data is boring, but data is actually beautiful. And I am also really crazy on Reddit. So if you don't use Reddit, I'll say just follow one subreddit, which is Data is Beautiful. And if you use Reddit, you know what I'm talking about probably. So what I like doing is sometimes I follow Data is Beautiful to get daily inspirations about clever data visualization that tell a story that can inspire action. So those are the 4 tools that I use and to keep learning. Now, this is the first part where I mainly focus on smart procurement and basic, you know, use of data to drive business decision kind of examples. The second part of my presentation, I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about the housekeeping, hardest hygiene work when it comes to really, how do you use data to run your business? The hardest part is data collection and normalization. And if you guys are a home cook and you love, you know, cooking delicious 5-course dinner with wine pairing, I'll tell you, the hardest part is always procuring the materials and chopping all the vegetables and preparing all the meat and then cleaning everything up. It's not the final putting things in the oven. It's not, that's easy. Anyone can fry, you know, an amazing ribeye steak, you know, 3 minutes, medium rare, boom, boom, 6 minutes. It is all the preparation, cleaning up. Data is exactly the same. So why am I telling you this? Because I think for the next 2 slides, I just want to give you a few mental models about spend classification. That's been really helpful to a lot of the professionals that we've been working with. So one thing that you can start thinking about when you want to look at your data set and start playing around and doing data sculpting, you can start splitting things between direct spend and indirect spend. For most organizations I talk to, they usually have pretty good tracking with direct spend. Say, for example, if you're a car manufacturer, you have to source real steel and semiconductors and rubber for your tires, right? All those are direct input to your production. Usually everyone is really on top of that. The harder part is, the computers that your team use to run the business when everyone's working remotely. And then Nancy decides that she wants to buy her own VPN solution. And then Joe may actually be like, oops, my mouse broke. I'm just going to order on Amazon. And then I'm going to expense it. Let me get a gamer mouse that, those where your hand can move like that. I actually thought about that and try to expense it. But then I thought, I don't want to upset a procurement professional. So indirect spend is where everything kind of goes a bit messy, right? So one thing you can start thinking about as an MRO professional is how do you start aligning and categorizing all the spend. A pro tip here, and maybe you're already doing that, is make sure for every vendor, you have a unique vendor ID. And for staff, you probably already have unique ID for the staffing and department units as well. With that, it becomes a lot easier later on if you need to join up the data and visualize things, because annoyingly, did you notice vendors sometimes like to call themselves a full name, sometimes with partnerships, sometimes with LLC, lowercase, uppercase. It is quite hard to kind of normalize data without a unique identifier per data type. So remember to do that. Now then, for suppliers, obviously we have OEMs, the brands, the 3Ms, the Caterpillars, distributors, custom manufacturers, and service companies. So these are all the ways you can spice up and slice and dice your data. The other aspect of it is Thomas actually has a taxonomy, industrial taxonomy that we've been building for 123 years, and you are free to use all of that. When you register for free on thomasnet.com, you create a profile. And I'm going to give you a really quick tour on how you can browse our suppliers and actually get a sense on our taxonomy, where we have 75 categories, including adhesive to sealant, alloy to zinc. I always say A to Z, we have everything. So that's the second way you can think about your spend classification, which is industrial categorization. And the third aspect of it, which is super important during COVID-19, is a company's firmographic background. This is important if your procurement and MRO sourcing needs are geo-specific and time-sensitive. What I mean by that is sometimes, we're just talking to one of the biggest electric company building the first solar farm in Texas, which is super exciting. And not only do they have to find maintenance, repair, and construction professionals within a certain radius, they also have to quite quickly figure out the right site, the right materials that they can rent and reuse over a different part of the field, right? So location of where your vendor is something that's important. The other aspect of it is firmographic data in terms of how long the company has been around, how many employees they have, and the rough revenue estimate. For example, during the sourcing crisis, I'm sure you guys have been through the thick and thin of it. You're looking for someone that can actually procure high quality face shields or nitrile gloves or N95 qualified mask. And not all vendors are made the same. There are counterfeit products. I have talked to numerous industrial and medical buyers telling me that they put down payments for millions of masks and they never were delivered. I have people telling me that they weighted their own nitrile gloves in boxes and they are 0.3 millimeters instead of 0.4, which is not NIOSH approved. So by working with manufacturers and suppliers that that have been in the business for a longer period of time, with more staff instead of some random company that popped up in 2021 trying to do this PPE said gold rush. Those data points are very critical for you to get a sense and procure smartly. And also remember at the beginning, I said there are two definitions of smart procurement. One of that is socially responsible and sustainable procurement. Now, I'm proud to be at Thomas because even though it's been a company for a long, long time, it structurally has a lot of incredible data that are optimized for diversity spend. What I mean by that is when you look for any manufacturers on Thomas, you can actually filter it by veteran-owned, minority-owned, women-owned, plus other technical certification like ISO, as well as FDA clean room if you're doing something that's more food and drug related. Now, that's a third aspect of how you can think about your spend classification. And I know for some of you who work for a bigger company, you might have a spend goal that is tied to a diversity target. So that's something that you can look into as well. Now, I see no questions, so I'm going to just barge on and really give you a framework on how thomasnet.com can help you search, evaluate, and connect with suppliers. And I'll call out 3 data points that you can use just by creating an account. We don't make money for you to use our platform. We make money by connecting high quality advertisers, supplier with buyers, but we don't push it onto people. The first priority for us is we are here to help power the growth of North American manufacturing. So back to this. Number 1, you can search on Thomas, and I'll give you a bunch of tools, and you can evaluate manufacturers with structured data, and you can also export the data and push it into your procurement system. And finally, you can connect with manufacturers, but also give us difficult briefs that you might not have ever sourced for before. And we have a team of engineers that can help suggest you with manufacturers at no cost to you. So great free resources. Number 1, how do you search and evaluate on Thomas? So as I mentioned, with COVID, we built a new heading, but we have over 70,000 of them. You can pop over to Thomas and search for any products and properties. One really good example is our fastener suppliers. So let me actually pop over to thomasnet.com and give you guys a quick live demo. So as you can see, I'm on Thomas, and for example, let's say you guys are really working for a renewable energy farm, and you're looking for bearings, right? So all you need to do is to pop over to Thomas, and you can search for bearings. And when I talk about spend classification, and if you're still new to your career and learning about different types of suppliers, Thomas is your Bible, I'm telling you. So for example, one thing you can start immediately learning a little bit more about is related categories, right? So I never learned so much about fasteners, bearings, and gaskets until I started working for Thomas. But you really can pop over. I'm a bit nerdy, if you can't tell already. You can expand. You can look at different types of, dude. Like, it's actually really cool. Like, you can look at bearings by the industry, but also by the material, I think I just saw rubber, carbon. And this is how you learn, right? As someone new to the sector, or you might be really seasoned. And I still have engineers from Boeing from the 80s writing to me like months ago saying, I still really like using Thomas, and you guys are more fun now that you're digital. So there it is. In addition, we also have different search filters, right? Based on company types. If you're looking for turnkey or you're looking for prototypers, for MRO, I imagine you will be more interested in working directly with distributors. So in addition, you may be like, yeah, Kath, you mentioned I should look at lean manufacturing and look for manufacturers who are closer to me. So you totally can punch in bearing suppliers that are geographically within 50 miles from you. Yeah, I live in the Catskills. There are really not a lot of industrial activities in here, but you get my drift. And the final really cool data points, as I kind of alert to when it comes to socially responsible smart procurement, is if you are looking to increase your diverse spend goal, say your boss is a veteran and he or she would like to support veteran-owned business, you actually can filter our search result with veteran-owned specific data points. Now, you said, Kath, hey, you mentioned I could download a bunch of the data. How do I do that? So I'm glad you asked. Once you find the manufacturers or distributor that does contain your sourcing supply, you actually can select a multiple number of them. Let's say, okay, I like this one and I like this one. You can select up to 5 manufacturers. I'm going to do 3. And then at this point, you actually can shortlist all of these suppliers. And I'm going to use this as an example. I'm just going to say, yep, 2021 May bearing supplier candidates. See, this is my life. I love looking at bearings. I Actually, I do. It is kind of cool. And once you save your shortlist and you see Kathy has 8 of them, I actually can just download the shortlist, and I click the download button. Immediately, you get the whole data in CSV format delivered into your inbox, which is super cool. And I know I'm getting old. I cannot see really tiny fonts anymore. Sad. Too much time spent on TikTok. Yeah, I'm trying to go cold turkey. Yeah, so here you can see the whole CSV list of all the companies that you've saved. You have their address, you have the postcode. You even actually have all these structured data that I mentioned to you before, including whether or not they fit your diversity spend goal, or if they have the right ASME or ISO certification. Plus, if you say, oh, Kathy, you know, what you said about finding manufacturers that have been around for a while is a great idea. You easily, like, you remember what I said, you easily can sort of data sculpt it a little bit. Imagine you actually have maybe, yeah, sorry, I just did the dark mode thing. Yes, okay, this is what I wanted. Oops, I want to do the other way around, because the older, the better. Because I'm getting old now. I'm like, yes, actually, don't be an ageist. Wine's better when it's old, so is whiskey. Right, so, boom. I'm seeing this. There's a great company, really kind of nicely mid-sized, $100 to $250 million, a distributor, founded in 1963. Hitting all the jackpot with a diversity spend. What could go wrong? Sounds like this is a company I want to reach out and start my procurement process with them. So that's what you get to do on Thomas. So that's the first part when it comes to, you know, the ability of searching on Thomas and really get to connect with manufacturers. So let me jump over and talk about the second part, evaluate. So on every single company card in the search result that you saw on my screen, there are really additional free data points you can access, including, for example, if you're looking for suppliers that are specific to your certification requirement, say if you're working for a defense and military government company. These days, NIST has a new standard for cybersecurity. You may want to actually take a look and see if they have that kind of certification available on the platform. At Thomas, we also just launched a new filter, which is USA made or Barrier Amendment. We have all three, and Buy American Act. So if you have to buy products that are certified to be made in the USA, we have that covered for you as well. And you also can click into these sort of icons with a little exit button. What it means is we actually deep link the company's self-declared information that they're GSA approved on their website on that specific web page. This means that I'm saving you on average 30 clicks from Google. If you use Google to search what you want, you have to still go onto the website and hunt down the verification information. Actually, on thomasnet.com in our search result, everything is already deep linked for you with our content team. And in addition, we actually deep link SBM certification to tell you if someone's veteran certificate is still available, is still valid, so you can triple verify it yourself as well, plus self-reported information. So being a visual learner, let me just jump back into my example, and I'm gonna pop back to thomas.com, and I would this time search for another product, let's say fasteners. So what I mean by that is, say I'm looking at the search results and there are a bunch that are quite interesting. Let me take a look. Okay, Arlington Fastener, cool. Let me take a look at this manufacturer in particular. I can pop over and look at the company profile page. On this page, you see a lot of incredible product and services capability, as well as, you know, let me see, yes. So you can see also the services that they're capable in delivering. So in addition, let me pop back to the search result. As you scroll through our catalog, you will see that we also link to the company's website, but don't forget that we have all these amazing additional data points that are the firmographic data that I just demonstrate to you that you can export and upload and download. So let me swing back onto my deck, and I just wanted to show you guys the final aspect of what I just talked about, which is how do you connect with new suppliers. So in my demo, I kind of added 3 manufacturers onto my list, and actually immediately you can click the request info button. And it's like, you know, trying to book a restaurant on Yelp. You can actually come in and really explain to these potential suppliers what subject is your request and when do you need a response by. You can actually even upload your BIM file, your CAT file, or your buying briefs, an NDA if you want to, and leave your information. And then you can submit to multiple suppliers, 5 at the maximum at a given time. So that's how you can connect to suppliers. And finally, I'm just going to show you an amazing free product on Thomas. Again, it should be a service because it's free. So what happened during COVID-19, guys, is I've been an advisor of multiple engineering communities who are trying to build open source ventilators, and now they're building oxygenator in India. And sometimes if you're an aerospace engineer, you may have never sourced a part that's for a ventilator, right? And you on Thomas can actually upload the brief onto a tool called Custom Quotes. It's free. When you click the button, it will take you to a form. So you come onto our platform, you find the Custom Quotes page, you click the Get Started button, and here you actually can choose your requirements, say which state you're in and what you're looking for, the quantity you're after. And in the live environment, let me slow it down, I can actually upload additional information. So say you might have a situation where, okay, Kath, I am asked to buy a special light bulb that will work with a special dimming tool that I've never used before, right? You can come here, click the form, really just tell us what you're looking for. It could be any custom services, or if it doesn't fit anything in particular, you can just say, I don't know. And once you find the type of subtype of what you're looking for, you at some point can actually attach a file, including your CAT drawing, your images, and NDA. Let us know if you have any additional requirements. And then if you have any certification preferences that we already talked about, you can check the boxes here. And our engineering team will give you up to 5 suppliers that we think best suit for your needs at no cost to you. So this really concludes everything I want to show you about Thomas, because I want this presentation to be quite a balanced business strategy, how you use data to guide your action kind of presentation. The other aspect of it is just to show you, by being in the industry for 123 years, we have tremendous amount of data in spend categorization and vendor mapping. So I hope that gave you a quick tutorial on what's possible. But I'll be honest, I'm still at the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to register on thomasnet.com, you will actually get a 5-course weekly email sequence from me directly, and you can ask any more questions if you like. So this sums up Thomas for procurement professionals and MROs, which include 500,000 company profiles in Canada and in the US. Tremendous amount of structured data that we accumulated for over a century. Advanced search filters for you to find exactly the type of suppliers and distributors you're after. You can compare your suppliers, and you can also export your data. So, and I will also give a shout out to Glacia if she is on the call, Brittany Hannabury. I have an amazing research and editorial engineering team, and they actually write a super in-depth guide to smart procurement. What I kind of gave you is my personal interpretation of what smart procurement is, but there's so much more in-depth information and related articles that you can look at to really kind of develop your own learning plan if you like to. I mentioned to Heather that she might already send a YouTube video. At some point, there's this great Coca-Cola FEMSA example where they have a spend category of $3 billion in South America, where they are responsible for over 300 distribution and bottling facilities. And this is a 12-minute video on how they started the whole process that I described from the beginning to the end, which is, number one, first, do the difficult hygiene housework in mapping all of your spend categories, direct, indirect, vendor types, and start actually rallying your organization and get everyone to use the same internal corpus and taxonomy for new sourcing briefs. So you start having visibility as to, am I overpaying this or am I even underpaying it within the same organization? So that for the actual procurement team, they can then do external comparison with a solid base with internal data. So it's a great short 12 minutes that I think you can, work out tonight and check it out. And finally, I think for Thomas, there are so many things we do, but we don't have time to cover it all. I kind of, as a nerd, I really enjoy business and all that, but I hate the idea of doing an MBA. I told my husband, I've used up all of my capability in taking exams. So what I've done is actually I've been interviewing lawyers, industry executives, and building super long form, in-depth guides on how you can rock in your career. There's a really great ebook on 5 tips to be a successful negotiator, from knowing your BATNA, like what are your best options, to even before you start your negotiation, what are the things you should think about, questions to think about emotionally, how do you prepare yourself to stand firm, but respectful. There are all the tips here. I also think if you guys are into prototyping and inventing, there's another really cool book out there that we just published recently as well. And we have a tremendous amount of technical guides. Feel free to drop by and check out our articles. And finally, we have a daily newsletter that goes out to 250,000 professionals, and it's across all sectors, from engineering, procurement, to business owners. So my joke is, this is actually my stock picker mailing list. The joke was, I kind of caught like an article about Tesla right around Elon hit the truck with a ball and broke the glasses. And I was like, I'm going to buy some shares. And now it's up by 500%. So yes, use your judgment though. I am not going to, I need a disclaimer that my suggestion will not yield any guaranteed gain or loss. So you still have to invest like a accredited investor yourself, but it's a great way to really understand the business. And finally, when it comes to those of you who have an engineering background and want to learn more about machine learning, there are a few courses that are free that are fantastic. As I mentioned, from Coursera, this is a University of London machine learning for all course. You don't need programmatic and scripting skills. So this is great for people who just want to get a sense of what's possible with machine learning. And then if you already know a bit of Python, you're a statistically really kind of enabled intellectual, you love your math and your pure math, then the foundations of machine learning with the 21 module is something that I used a lot in this webinar, and you may want to look a little bit more into it. Both are free. So that's really is the end. I'm Kathy. You can stay in touch with me. You got my email. And if you ever want to stay in touch and nerd out more about the industry, join our industry panel. We have around 800 community members where we constantly send out survey, really in-depth report. I just released a report on 2021 state of manufacturing in North America. So yeah, that's it. I am not seeing any new questions, Heather. So
I'm not seeing any questions coming in either, but if there are anybody, or if there are any questions out there from anybody, please feel free to send those through in the chat now. I have one question. I probably can come up with more, but I have one question off the top of my head as well. Who are all of the stakeholders involved in the smart procurement process within an organization? I know that there's often dedicated procurement staff, but maybe outside of those people, who else is involved in that whole process?
That's a really great question, Heather. I think let's use 2 types of companies as an example, right? You might work for a mom and pop company with 30 to 50 employees. And in that regard, you may have someone that does the procurement side of things. You may or may not have a business analyst, but for sure you will have an accountant and a person that's functioning as a CFO. The way when we work with different manufacturers and procurement professionals, it's usually like an informal unit of those functions that work together to start visualizing spend. And a lot of it is something that's important that you have to do towards your end of the year audit cycle anyway. But what would be even better is for the more technically savvy team member in those smaller organizations, if they can build a dashboard or a template that can be refreshed on a monthly basis, and that can turn into like an executive reporting. Those scenarios are very common, but from what I could see, and we chatted about it, that not all communities or businesses have the capability to do that kind of things today. And that's why I always say you don't have to be a data scientist, you don't have to be a BI. There's software that can help you to do that. But find the stakeholders, and usually it's the people that can sign off the budget.
Awesome. I'm curious if you've seen like the end users be involved at all either. So working with manufacturers, are people on the floor, the operations teams ever kind of involved in that procurement process, or is it mostly just the finance side of the house?
It's a really good question. I think usually the in most manufacturers, it is actually the design engineers that have the most say in the procurement process. So a little bit different from MRO, right? You guys usually buy products that are pre-made, that you have to make sure that it's continuously supplying into the operations of your business. But if you are someone who is actually building a new solar panel and you have to find a special type of glass, it won't be the procurement department that initiate that process. It would be the design engineer working with chemists in the organization to find the right definition, then give it to the procurement department for them to find better and cheaper and more reliable vendors.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that was my question. I'm not seeing any more coming in. You must have just been so thorough today. So I guess we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Kathy, and everyone once again for your time. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing a little bit more about smart procurement and ThomasNet with all of us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, guys.
Absolutely. All right. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.